I have Jubin here, who's a patent attorney and founder of Dana Legal Services based in Silicon Valley. He was Chief IP Officer of Visa, and he's active in fintech and telecom innovation, among other areas. Jubin brings a strategic point of view to IP law, and we welcome you to the show, Jubin. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. This episode today is brought to you by Neo IP, where we help companies increase their valuation and protect their business through strategic business planning and IP protection. At Neo IP, we provide corporate and legal services to help companies manage risk, develop portfolios, and monetize their IP assets. We believe that intellectual property is a valuable business asset with exceptional potential, and Neo IP is here to protect that. Learn more about us at neoipassets.com. Thank you. All right, Jubin, it's great to have you on the show today.
It's great to be here.
Thanks. You are such a well-respected IP attorney. How did you get into patent law?
That's a good question. When I think about my childhood growing up, I was always curious about how things work, taking things apart, putting things together, those kinds of things. And then through my college studies, I was in the middle of applying to go to grad school to do my PhD. And a friend of my dad's was a lawyer. And he said, did you know there's an area of law called patent law? Now imagine this, I'm an engineer, had no idea an area called patent law even existed. So he explained it to me. And then I realized, oh my God, instead of me being the only one that's taking apart things and putting things together, I can work with a bunch of people who are doing it and then benefit from all their energy, effort, and enthusiasm. So that's what flipped me into it. I immediately, right then and there, within 3 months, I was applying and in law school. So I remember it was December of 92. And then August of 93, I was in law school.
Fantastic. And you've never looked back, for sure.
No, it's been nothing but straight ahead.
Awesome. I kind of always introduced myself as a recovered engineer. I went through that same experience, just didn't know about patent law until I was thinking about returning to school for graduate school. And then the idea of working with people from high tech to biotech was really attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to hear what's changing, who's innovating, and just how technology is evolving over time. Let's talk about your view on IP strategy. You're really well known for that. What are the top issues that you advise companies to consider when they're thinking about strategy and developing a portfolio?
Well, if we can limit our discussion to boundaries of countries. So, every person that is looking at IP strategy first has to look at, what country they're going to start off in or where they're going to go. I think one of the key things to having a good IP strategy is to have a good business strategy. If you understand what your business is about, if you understand how you're going to how you're going to make money from the idea or the conception you have, then you have a really good chance of aligning your IP with your revenue stream. Because at the end of the day, if you get IP just to get IP, but it doesn't really relate to or tie into your business model, your revenue, what you've got is a great resume builder, but nothing that's really going to help your company grow. So my number one thing would be understand your business strategy so then you can align it with your IP. And I think the second thing is vetting the person who's going to do your IP for you. I think it's really important that whenever you go to hire a patent attorney, you ask the right things, you know the right things. Not only are they supposed to be an expert in what they do legally, but they should understand your area of technology. Like I will never do chemical related patents. It's not my area of expertise. It's not what I understand, but I will do electrical patents or mechanical patents. So I think the second thing is whoever you end up bringing on board or hiring, make sure you vet them. Make sure you're asking the right questions about what to do. Because again, a good IP strategy to me involves having a good business model and then having a person that understands that and can execute it for you. They're the ones who are ultimately going to implement it.
Sure. And you bring up a really good point on the geography. A lot of early stage companies and even university research organizations, they consider this going international very quickly, and which are the key countries, the biggest, most active countries to invest in. And yet we often see that companies don't end up using a lot of their foreign filings. It's just too far beyond where they are with their business strategy. What are your thoughts on how to consider? What do you advise companies on choosing those geographies?
I think if you're going to go outside the boundary of the market that's most important to you, so let's assume it's the US that's most important market to you in terms of what you anticipate your revenue is going to come from. I think the next thing to do beyond that is to consider maybe one country and then start to allocate budgets to it, which would be perhaps a secondary market. I think most companies would say that between 2 to 3 geographical markets, they will cover the majority of what is their revenue. To get too much into multiple countries, these things can get very expensive. Yeah. They can get very expensive very quickly.
You've coined the phrase revenue patents, right? So talk a little bit about revenue patents.
So many years ago, I had a client come to me, and what had happened was they had a patent application written for them. They had gotten the patent issued, and they'd gone out and started licensing it to third parties. What had happened in that patent is they hadn't thought about their revenue stream. And as a result of the licensing agreements being inadequate or not properly done, they ended up giving away a lot of their technology, which they didn't intend. So the third party became a better source. So what led me to start thinking about that is, if you start thinking about the ways in which you're going to make money, whether it's a licensing, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's having a third party make part of it and give it to you, all these different ways. Yeah. You really need to understand what you put in the patent and how it ties into the revenue stream. So what I tell my clients is this: imagine the money flowing from point A to point B, and you're standing right in the middle of that revenue. If you look towards A, you can claim the patent from what's happening from the perspective of A, the stuff flowing out. Or if you look towards B, where the money's going, you can claim things from that perspective. So it's really important to understand the money is flowing and who is giving what to whom in exchange for the money. And that will help you determine how to write your claims.
Love it. Revenue patents, coined by Jubin Dana right here. Tell me a little bit about your role with Visa. I always consider you, whenever I think of Visa, I consider you as the person who brought strategic IP into Visa and that portfolio. What's the story there?
When I went to work for Visa, they were a company that had, at the time, 13 issued patents total, no pending applications. And of those 13 patents, 4 had expired for either age or not paying maintenance fees. So I began to think a little bit about what the company did. And the company as a whole is technology-based company. I mean, it's moving information from point A to point B, and then from point B back to point A, and doing all these different transactions. I mean, at peak volume, they're doing over 6,000 transactions a second. And so a company that's working like that and what they're doing has to protect their technology. Now, remember, that's at the time when Visa was getting ready to go public. Prior to that, Visa had not even thought about these kinds of IP issues because the banks own them, and the banks had told Visa, anything you do on your platform has to also work on MasterCard's platform. So the banks kind of forced this non-compete in terms of IP. But as soon as MasterCard went public and Visa was going to go public, it became a concern. Now they had to compete with respect to IP and ownership of it. So my main strategy in that context was, number one, I, as outside counsel, had often worked with companies without knowing anything about what their business strategy was. And then this again ties into the revenue patents. I had no idea, as an outside counsel providing services to a big company, say Apple, Intel, whatever, what their IP strategy was. All I would do is here's an idea, draft a patent for it. Here's another idea, draft a patent for it. So the first thing I did at Visa, I said, I'm going to bring together all the business groups that are the major revenue generators for Visa, and put them in a room in front of my entire group of patent attorneys and have them explain every year to the entire group what the main objective was from a business point of view. And then we would have all of the attorneys that are the patent attorneys from different law firms get a good, clear vision. So my main strategy was bring the business information to the patent attorneys so they're not drafting in a vacuum. And the second thing I did is I forced the patent attorneys to collaborate with one another in a sense of sharing information and creating a way whereby if one group is working on one area of technology, one firm, and another firm is working on another area, there is cross-pollination of information so that they're both aware. So the strategy was bring the business information to the attorneys, and make the attorneys share with each other what they're doing. And based on that, we were building the portfolio.
And you grew it to a pretty notable size, as I recall.
Yeah, I think their portfolio at the time went from 13 to over 500 pending applications in the course of 2 years. And that's the amount of time I had to actually prepare for the IPO.
Just absolutely incredible growth there and strategically done. Well done.
Thank you.
What do you see going on in fintech today? What are some of your thoughts on trends there in that sector in fintech?
I have a lot of thoughts. So before we get into that, let's first define what fintech means. I think some people listening to this podcast may have their own definition.
Sure.
So when we use the word fintech, in my mind, I'm talking about technology that's specific to financial transactions. Is that what your understanding is?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we put ourselves into that definition as the background, then I think the next big thing for fintech is, and this goes back to my days at Visa, Visa always considered its biggest competitor as the United States government, cash. We've all heard cash is king, and Visa always considered that its biggest competitor, because as long as you're doing cash-based transactions, then you don't have credit-based transactions, and therefore Visa's losing money, and so are the banks. So I think the next big thing in fintech is this transition from the government going from a paper-based monetary to a electronic-based monetary system. I think what's going to happen in due time is there's going to be a lot of technology built around tracking financial transactions so that you can't become anonymous or mysterious. And I think the government's going to have a big hand in it. I think they're already getting themselves into these NFTs or non-fungible tokens and trying to control cryptocurrency. But as the world is developing, we're becoming more virtual, less physical. And so as a result of that, the financial transactions that are associated with those things have to become more virtual. So I think that's where it's going to go. I think the government itself is going to help replace paper money with electronic money.
Yeah, the digital dollar has been a subject of conversation in DC and probably globally as well. So different than crypto, though, right? The Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Do you see any issues there for crypto versus digital dollar?
I think the two are going to compete head to head. I think, it's either going to be digital dollar or cryptocurrency. Well, maybe there'll be some overlap and it won't be an absolute sense as I'm explaining it. But I think what's going to happen with cryptocurrency is the trust factor behind it is always a concern. The ability to know that it's backed by something more than just the fact that people exchanged it and know its authenticity. Like, when we talk about the US dollar and the US government, I think we have a lot of faith in it because it's backed by something that is bigger and stronger than just encryption or technology that is protected from being manipulated.
And yet maybe a few downsides to not being totally anonymous, right? There is an opportunity for issues of government getting into our house, if you will, or our wallets. Fascinating. So do you have other thoughts on NFTs or metaverse? These are trending areas in tech.
Yeah, I think with respect to NFTs, I find it very interesting that they're starting to generate and associate themselves with a lot of value. I've always found it difficult to, myself personally, put a value around something that I can't grab and touch and hold physically. Like I can buy a car, I can touch a car, but an NFT, I mean, what do? Do I put it in my wallet and take it out and show someone? But again, there is, it's very interesting how this technology is developed, and it seems to be very big in the world of art. Yes. So I think it's very cool. It's very fascinating. Not something I would ever put my money in, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, great. It's good to hear from you on that. Tell us about what you're looking forward to with your firm, with Dana Legal Services. The practice of law is evolving. What milestones or things are you looking forward to achieving with your firm in the coming years?
I think our firm is very, very interested in being able to provide information and data to people without any obligation on their part to financially compensate us. We're becoming a firm that wants to provide service. I believe the legal model we have of how law firms are run and how they're put together is outdated. It needs to be updated. And I think that when you have someone that has information, they should be willing to freely share it. And of course, the more you share, the greater the abundance of the good energy and karma you create. So for us, it's to become the leading IP information source. Whether we are hired as the person that does the ultimate work or not, we want to be the person that educates people. We want to be the person that provides that information. And again, I went to law school and I've spent, almost 30 years doing this. So I have a lot of knowledge. Why can't I share that at a no cost or low cost to people? I mean, the most amazing thing happened to me the other day. I had someone from a correctional facility inside prison write to me. And of course, they have to physically write. They can't email. So write to me and say, hey, I have an idea for this. Can you help me patent it? And I thought, how on earth did this person find out about us? So I wrote back to them, and apparently they found out about us through someone who had done some research for them and then met with them and told them about us. So apparently we came up high on the informational sharing scale, which I think is where the future of law firm is going.
Yeah, I love that. We have always coupled with patent data and insights that derive from patent data to inform our clients and strategy. And we are currently using actually a company that I founded, Patent Forecast, that provides for real-time patent data to explore so that people can get insights in a sector, who's investing, what are the trends, and that kind of thing. What other data sources or softwares do you prefer?
I don't have a preference per se. I'm always led by my client's budget and what they're willing to do. So if they say to me they have a preferred source they use, that's what I use. But the main tool that I use is just general education to get information. I find that when I'm talking to an inventor who has a lot of energy and time and experience in the industry or the area that they're developing, I can get a lot of information from them, which can then help them understand or better protect or search their area. So I, unfortunately, are those people who has the opinion that, you do things as the client dictates, not as always I seem best. Because again, I'll give them the advice. They may follow it. They may not.
Understood. Well, you certainly have been a leader in IP strategy, and your firm is doing amazing things. But I know you keep in touch with trends and you are active in the podcast arena. Do you have any favorite podcasts that you think would be interesting for our listeners?
I don't have a favorite one. I think I listen to some. I would say that the one thing that I think is very important when it comes to podcasts is understanding whether or not the information being shared is being shared by someone who has a lot of experience in that space, or whether they're just, providing general content about something they became aware of. I think there are podcasts that inform you, and then there are podcasts from experts that educate you. So I'm more of a fan of the educating, but again, it's also good to be informed because you don't know what you don't know until someone tells you a little bit about it.
That's right. For entrepreneurs, I do really like the Entrepreneurs on Fire, the EO Fire podcast, John Lee Dubas. I think he does one every day. It's extraordinary, some of the experts he's had on there, but it's really been a pleasure talking with you, Jubin Dana of Dana Legal Services today.
It's been great to be here, JiNan.
Thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you? What's your website, or how do they reach you?
We have a website for the firm in general. It's danalegalservices.com. It's just as it's there. And then we also have a YouTube channel, social media content that's under The Patent Guru. So The Patent Guru is where you go to see all the videos and all the information sharing.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to keeping an eye on you and your advice, Patent Guru. Jubin, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.